Hello and welcome to the Formula 1 Show, or TF1 for short. I am Tinus Ferreira, your host, friend, advisor, and umbrella that protects your fragile skin against the scorching sun that is the world of Formula 1. Now today we will discuss the happenings around the Spanish Grand Prix, and I would just like to begin with a moment of silence for all of our hopes and dreams that Ferrari is going to bring the heat against Mercedes, because this weekend they were miles off, like not even in the same WhatsApp group. It was quite frankly quite sad to see, and I guess we'll discuss it a bit later, but I think let's get right into it and discuss the victors for the 5th Grand Prix in a row. Mercedes are on an absolute high. They are doing incredibly well. I think it's a record-breaking achievement for them to get another 1-2. So I think they're the team now that had the most 1-2s to start the season off with, which is 5. They're therefore beating Williams. I think that had 4 in 1992, which is, I mean, in this day and age, what an achievement that is. And it's not even something that they were able to achieve in those extremely dominant years of 2014 to 2016. So, I mean, you need to doff your cap to Mercedes, because they are doing an incredible job, and they deserve every bit of credit that they get, because, I mean, they've just been operating faultlessly. So I guess let's maybe discuss the two Mercedes drivers, so Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. In qualifying, I mean, Bottas was looking the man the whole way through, even since Friday practice through Saturday. In FP3, he had that bit of a strange slide off into the gravel, and then sort of lost a lot of time. Couldn't really run and just get his car into the final, do the final quali runs and things like that. But I mean, Bottas was right back on it in qualifying. Did an incredible lap to get pole position in the third stages of the latter stages of qualifying. And I mean, I think Hamilton was quite upset afterwards, and you can sort of see it in the way that he went to go shake Bottas's hand, and he was very abrupt with his answers to all of the sort of questions asked by the press. And yeah, I think after qualifying, Hamilton realized that this is actually going to have to be game on properly, and that he's going to have to get his elbows out and not play the happy-go-lucky member of a team anymore, and actually look after his own interests a bit more. Not that he usually does not, but I really do think it was sort of a wake-up call for him, this qualifying session, where he realized that he's going to really have to pull his socks up and put his thinking cap on, and get cracking, and realizing that Bottas isn't going to go away like he did last year. So a scratchy performance by Lewis Hamilton in qualifying. If any of you watched it, I mean, that whole video of his fastest lap in the final stage of qualifying, it was just all over the place. It was sliding and scratching and pulling at the wheel, and it was just looking like a handful for him to keep his car on the track. So yeah, I mean, I think all of the Hamilton fans were worried after qualifying that the race is going to be difficult. But, in typical Hamilton fashion, he came back and he put Bottas in his place after that start. I mean, Bottas, let's be honest, he did have some clutch issues, it seemed. But, I mean, Hamilton got a really good away. He made sure in the first corner that he's ahead, and he stayed ahead, and he was blisteringly fast throughout the whole race. I mean, nobody could touch him. He was consistently just being faster than all of the other drivers. I mean, I guess that's the advantage of being in clear air. But never once did it look like Lewis Hamilton was in doubt for the victory. A very, very good, comfortable, solid performance for Lewis Hamilton in the race. And I think he sort of righted the ship that was listing quite precariously after qualifying. So I think he'll be pleased with that effort. And then I think, just to tie back to what I mentioned a bit earlier, I think you can just applaud Mercedes for the absolute efficiency and just the professionalism that they sort of approach a race like this, where they are very decisive on strategy. They're decisive on what they want to do. They don't and ah like some other teams that we're going to get to just now. And yeah, I mean, they've put in 5 flawless performances this whole year. I mean, obviously they got a bit lucky in Bahrain, but all of the other 4 races, they absolutely deserve the position that they got, and good for them, and they deserve, as I've mentioned before, all of the credit that they're getting. And I think from a, let's say, more a car's perspective, the way that they've now been able to sort of just be better in every aspect almost. I mean, I guess they're slightly down on engine power still compared to the Ferrari, but the car is fast everywhere. It's fast in the fast, sort of the swooping corners where it's always been fast. It's been fast in the medium type tighter corners, and it's for the first time ever, I mean, with the design approach that they're following, for the first time ever, it's actually they're fast in the super slow corner. So that last sector on the Barcelona track is usually a track where Red Bull used to be way ahead of everybody else. But I mean, Mercedes was even fastest there, which is to me incredibly interesting. It just shows how dominant their car is at the moment, where, you know, in the past, over the previous few years, they always had tracks where they struggled, like Monaco, like Singapore, because of the fact that their car isn't sort of designed to be that fast around the sort of slow, you know, tight types corners, which obviously you get a lot of at Monaco and at Singapore. So, I mean, that's a very, very impressive achievement from Mercedes that, you know, despite the sort of design approach that they usually take with their cars, which is sort of a low rake design. I mean, I won't get into rake now. I might discuss, you know, in a separate episode, when you maybe discuss some design philosophies. But, you know, I mean, that's an impressive achievement by Mercedes. And I think that's something that should really alarm both Red Bull and Ferrari, because that now means, and I am of the opinion that Mercedes in 2 weeks come Monaco, they're probably going to be the fastest again, because Monaco is basically very similar to what you see, you know, in the last sector of Barcelona Grand Prix, where it's, you know, slow type corners, not a lot of sort of fast swooping corners. It's very much a sort of a low speed type circuit. I guess, you know, the bumpy nature or the difficulty with tire warm up might throw some spanners in the works. But in principle, Mercedes is probably going to be the fastest team in Monaco again. And that's usually been a track where they have been very weak at, where usually Red Bull is extremely strong, with Ferrari sort of being second and Mercedes a distant third. But I think Mercedes is going to be right in it for this Monaco Grand Prix. And I think Red Bull and Ferrari should be scared. Now, speaking of our favorite red team, I mean, as I mentioned in the intro, Ferrari are in quite a bit of trouble, especially given, you know, where they were during testing and all of our expectations during the first few races of the season. Now, during qualifying, they were, I think after practice 2, we already knew that this is going to not go well for them, because they were way off in terms of their race pace. They weren't on top of things in the qualifying runs. It just wasn't looking promising. But, you know, we were all hoping, because Ferrari is bringing an upgraded engine that they've moved up, you know, 2 weeks in their development calendar, and we were all gonna just marvel at this incredible engine that they have. And as far as I can understand, the engine did actually perform well, but they just lost so much time in that last sector, and comparing to the Mercedes, that it just didn't make any difference. In qualifying, they didn't stand a chance. They were almost a second behind Bottas and well behind Hamilton, even though Hamilton could basically just manage to get his car around the track. And obviously Leclerc had that strange incident where he basically destroyed half of his barge board by running over a curb, which obviously compromised his qualifying, and Vettel was sort of nowhere in qualifying as well. In terms of the race, I mean, strategy, Vettel got a good start. Let's maybe go there. Vettel had a good start, sort of challenged Bottas for second place, but then locked up his brakes, and I think that sort of cooked his goose for the first sort of few laps, where he had this massive flat spot on his tires, and it sounded like quite heavy vibrations, and he was just losing time to his younger teammates just behind him. And then Ferrari ran, of course, into their first major problem of the day, where Leclerc was clearly faster and Vettel had a self-confessed issue, and the team was just umming and ahhing and twiddling their thumbs and probably having a slight freak out and not knowing what to do. And is this going to upset Sebastian? Is this going to upset Charles? Is this going to upset the fans? Is this going to upset the Tifosi? I don't know what they were thinking, but they took way too long with their decision. They had to tell Vettel, listen, Vettel, you had your chance. You messed up your tire. Let Leclerc go past. See if he can do, make more progress against the Mercedes and against Verstappen. But no, they sort of told Vettel to try and go faster. Obviously, Vettel couldn't go faster because his one tire was busted. And then, after a few laps and after, Mercedes was already about 11 seconds up the road, they decided, okay, they're going to get Charles Leclerc to go through. Leclerc did go through, was faster than Vettel, couldn't quite keep pace with the Mercedes because, let's be honest, they just didn't have the actual speed in their car to be able to do that. But just in terms of the racing against Max Verstappen, I feel Ferrari didn't make the right decision there, and they're not being decisive in their choices. And I mentioned that Mercedes are so decisive in sort of their approach to this is how they're going to run their race. Both instances, Mercedes pitted Bottas first because Bottas had the immediate threat with Red Bull behind, and that was their decision. Even though, I guess Hamilton could have asked, no, but why? I'm the lead driver. Why aren't you pitting me first? Mercedes makes their decisions, and they're able to support their decisions in most cases relatively well. Now, obviously, Ferrari had this incident, after the first round of pit stops. Now Vettel's on the medium tires and Leclerc is on the harder tires, obviously the slower tires, and Vettel steams up to Leclerc and Leclerc refuses to let Vettel pass. Now again, Ferrari sits thinking, oh no, what are we going to do? Leclerc is now ahead and Vettel is now behind. Vettel is clearly the faster driver, but we just gave Leclerc his chance and now, we put him on the harder tires. What are we going to do? And again, a few laps later, then finally they decide to let Vettel through. Again, Vettel is way behind Verstappen, and they, at the end of the day, they don't manage to actually get past the Red Bull, all because the fact that they were fumbling about not being able to actually make a decision. And if you watched the race, you heard that the one Leclerc's engineer thought they were on the same strategy and Vettel's engineer thought they were on a different strategy, and just the whole team was confused and no one was knowing what's going on. And guys, this is the team that's supposed to be the main threat to Mercedes. And compare the operational disaster of Ferrari versus the actual, organized force that is Mercedes. And how do you... they're going to have to improve that by so much. It's actually frightening, because to do things like that at that level isn't really acceptable, and we've been seeing it way too often. And I don't know what it is with the organizational structure in that team, but something's going to have to change. And I think, discussing the actual race, apart from discussing the actual race, I just want to, put on my smug voice for a second and just refer you all back to, one of my episode 1 or 2 of this podcast, where I spoke about the secret aerodynamicist that the BBC has to write columns for them every now and again, where he mentioned the differing design approaches between Mercedes and Ferrari, and the fact that, Ferrari might seem fast right at the beginning of the season or in testing, but that they sort of designed them into a corner where, in terms of developing their car, it's going to be a bit difficult. And that has turned out to be the case, where Mercedes has, been developing their car constantly, and Ferrari just sort of staying stagnant. And the most prominent evidence of this is just the fact that Vettel's final qualifying time was no faster than the actual fastest lap that he did in Barcelona, right at the beginning of the year, which is, if I was Mattia Binotto, the Ferrari team principal, I'd be concerned. Concerned is the word. Yes, that's what I would choose. So, that is a bit worrying for Ferrari, and you're sort of seeing how they keep moving back race after race after race, where they were so far behind the Mercedes and basically competing with the Red Bulls now for best of the rest, where, in the beginning of the year, they were way ahead of Red Bull still and sort of in the mix with Mercedes. So I don't know if this is a once-off thing. Monaco, I don't think it's going to go much better. Apparently, they're bringing new suspension there, so let's see if that works. But yeah, I have to say my hopes for their championship challenge is dimming quite aggressively. But, I'm never one to give up, so let's see. In terms of the drivers, Vettel did okay. I felt throughout he actually drove quite a strong race after having pitted for his tires. Leclerc, it was sort of a mixed bag from him. He had the mistake in qualifying, which had quite a severe effect on, how his qualifying turned out, which I guess was a bit unlucky for him. And then he drove a very good first stint on the soft tires. He was showing quite good pace, being the third fastest car on the road. And then after putting him on the hard tires, he basically fell away and just didn't have the speed. So yeah, fourth and fifth again, which I think for Ferrari isn't acceptable. But, let's hope, and I think we can all hope that they do sort out their issues and can come back strongly over the next few races. Now, Red Bull, Max Verstappen, let's be honest. I know I've been critical of him in the past, and some of you guys have pointed that out to me, and I'm sorry, but, I might not like him that much as a personality, but he's doing an extremely good job as a driver, and he is putting that Red Bull right at the maximum of where it can be every single race, and that should be commended, and it is fair that he was driver of the day. He deserved it. I'm pleased for him, and he did a good job in qualifying and in the race. Didn't really put a foot wrong. Red Bull was good on the strategy, so well done to them. Now, Mr. Pierre Gasly, he is improving. You can see he's improving. He has closed the gap down to Verstappen, but it's still a bit noticeable, the difference in pace between the two. So I don't know if it's now just a matter of, Verstappen being a lot more comfortable with the team and the car, and Gasly still trying to find his feet. But, he was a bit unlucky picking up sort of that big piece of rubber that stuck to his front wing throughout the second half of the race, where he wasn't really able to show, the pace of the others. And I think Red Bull as a team are now really shaping up to be not only a Ferrari challenger, but a potential Mercedes challenger over the latter stages of the season, where, if there's one team that can develop at a pace that Mercedes can, it's probably Red Bull. So if they can sort out their car, sort out their engine, they can really be up there, in a couple of races' time. So that's also something to look forward to. And I think also something that Ferrari needs to start worrying about even more. Let's just talk about Formula 1.5. So all of the midfield teams. Haas finally had a good performance. They sorted out the tyre warm-up issues that they were having over the first few races, with Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean scoring some points for the team, and Grosjean scoring his first point, which is obviously extremely exciting for the Frenchman. I feel that's the main thing to report. They had a slight coming together, but no harm, no foul, nothing horrible happened there. McLaren, Sainz was one of my drivers of the day. I feel he put that McLaren higher up the points than what it actually deserved. I think he got an 8th place there, so well done to him. Lando Norris actually did a very good job in qualifying, but he didn't have a good Sunday. He was sort of struggling the whole race after, and then eventually crashed with Lance Stroll. Anyway, we'll talk about him later. Toro Rosso, good performance by both drivers again. Kvyat scored some points and Albon just missed out, but I still feel it was a very good performance by both of the drivers. And Gasly, better watch out. Both of these drivers are coming for his seat, so he is going to really have to raise his game, and no better place to do that than Monaco in the next race. Now for Renault, I feel in an overall sense, it's probably another weekend to forget. Hülkenberg had that weird qualifying mess up where, he crashed or he ran off the road, broke his front wing, drove all the way back. Then Renault put on the previous version of the front wing, without the upgrades that they brought to the car. And then they didn't tell the actual FIA. And then Hülkenberg was basically relegated to start from the back. And it was just a weird, messy situation that I really don't understand. But Hülkenberg did do well to actually drive from right at the back to finish one spot behind his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, who obviously started way up the field. Ricciardo I think he drove actually quite a good race. He was in the points, he was challenging Carlos Sainz the whole way through. And then obviously Renault messed up his strategy a bit by putting him on the harder tires, similar to what Ferrari did with Leclerc. I still feel like Renault needs some direction or some momentum, because I feel like, they're really trying. They're trying to develop their car, trying to improve their engine, but they just haven't had that breakout race that I think we're all waiting for. So let's see, maybe in Monaco in 2 weeks' time, maybe in Montreal after that. Sauber, they weren't really, lighting up the timing screens, lighting up my life. They weren't lighting up anything, let's be honest. So not really going to say a lot about them. Not one of the two drivers really had a standout performance or anything like that. Team Racing Points. Now, Lance Stroll, I don't understand actually how he does this, but I think he has like the longest active streak of not making it into the second part of qualifying, even though this is now the 5th race that he is driving for Force India. Force India, I mean Racing Point. And he's still not making it into the second part of qualifying, which, I mean, how do you, as a race team owner or race team manager, how do you find that acceptable? So again, and I've mentioned this so many times over the year, that Lance Stroll, I don't know what he has to do, but he has to fix something, because it ain't working. I guess in his defense, it was sort of a weaker track for Racing Point overall, where his teammate Sergio Perez also didn't really make a big impact. So let's excuse Lance this one a bit. Let's not excuse him fully, but let's give him like a half excuse. And I mean, lastly, Williams, I don't have time to speak about them. As far as I'm aware, they are still finishing the formation lap. So good luck to them. Now, I guess now that we've discussed all of the teams, I guess we can just maybe talk about the race itself and just sort of the reaction of the fans and some of the journalists after the race. And I've brought this up as sort of vaguely before, but I have a bone to pick with them, because immediately after the race finished, everybody was going, it was the most boring race that they've ever seen. They had to be, woken up by their parents halfway through, or like they were drooling down, their chin just out of pure boredom and out of not having anything better to do, because, there wasn't any overtakes. And Mercedes was winning again for the millionth time over the past few years. Now, firstly, Mercedes beating everybody else after 2 regulation changes. So just keep in mind, so obviously they were dominant from 2014 to 2016. Then they changed the regulations. The whole design of the car changed. They did a very good job. They were dominant in 2017, 2018. Again, they changed the regulations, and now they're dominant again. Now, obviously, changing the regulations to, level the playing field isn't working, because let's be honest, Mercedes is now a team of such capability and of such strength that with the budget that they have, chances are you're probably going to widen the gap by changing the regulations every year, because Mercedes are most probably, and historically we've seen this, are going to do the best job. And that's not a bad thing. If they do the best job, then it's the responsibility of the other teams to do a better job. So we cannot be angry at Mercedes or angry at Formula One for, providing the same sort of race outcome every week, because Ferrari hasn't been doing their job. They have a similar sized budget to what Mercedes have. As far as I understand, they get more money every year than what Mercedes does, and they're not doing a good enough job. And same goes for Red Bull. I mean, Red Bull are getting there, but it's not Mercedes' fault for being better than everybody else. I mean, they still need to build a car and pick their drivers and decide on strategy and, take a design approach. It's not their fault that they're doing this well. They should be commended for doing this well, and the other teams should be encouraged to do better. And I think as a fan, we need to appreciate this, and we also need to understand that having 1 million overtakes at every race isn't going to make it more interesting necessarily. Seeing the top 4 or 5 drivers going hammer and tongs around the track, pushing each other every lap and really trying to eke out every half a second that they can, that should also be interesting. And the really, really tight midfield that we're currently experiencing, where we have McLaren and Renault and Haas and Toro Rosso and Sauber and Racing Point and not Williams, but all of those teams are basically within half a second of each other all the time. And just it's fascinating to see how they're trying to outmaneuver each other. So I feel from my own perspective, I wouldn't say this is the most exciting race, but it was still a very, very interesting race, and all of the things going on behind the boards with Ferrari's strategy and the whole tension between the drivers. There's lots and lots to enjoy still. So I really would encourage and would like, Formula One fans and pundits to, take a chill pill and stop being so damn critical of every single Formula One race, because each and every race so far, well, for me at least, has provided lots to talk about. I mean, I've now been keeping you busy for about 25 minutes and I'm not even close to being finished. So good luck. I think it's time for the typical and traditional awards that I usually present after a Formula One race. And the Pasta Maldonado Award for most dunderheaded action of the weekend must obviously go to Ferrari's whole pit strategy team that are running around like headless chickens, not communicating with each other. One's engineer telling them one thing and another driver's engineer telling him another thing, and umming and ahhing and taking a siesta before making a decision around, which driver is the faster one. They are throwing this away for themselves and they are making themselves look like idiots. So they need to stop. Secondly, the Lewis Hamilton #Blessed Award goes to the main man himself, Mr. Lewis Hamilton, for, Bottas's unlucky clutch situation where he was basically, he just couldn't get the best start, and Hamilton grabbed it with both hands and sped off in the distance. So Lewis was lucky this time, and I think he was very happy for it. Thirdly, the Nico Hülkenberg Podium Award for unluckiest driver. So for me, this was a bit of a difficult one this year, this race, just because there wasn't one specific incident where I was like, I'm in shame, the poor guy. But I've decided to give it to Pierre Gasly for getting things stuck in his front wing and basically removing him from the equation during the second half of the race. And let's be honest, it's an equation he desperately needs to be a part of. He needs to really, get stuck into that top 6, which he isn't really at the moment. So that's it, folks. Thank you for listening in. It's been a treat as always. Please subscribe, comment, rate, or even share the episode if you enjoyed it. And I mean, how can you not enjoy such a lovely, silky voice crooning at you every weekend? Please also give me a follow on Twitter. Just search for @TF1 Show and you'll find it. I'll chat to you all again next week. Bye.